Well, this is some heavy shit I'm gonna cover. Wow. Just just throw in the intro. Hi guys, I'm Richie Roberts, and I watch a lot of anime. I'm a writer, director, uh, voice actor for Fat Dog Studios. I do a lot of different things, and I I love good characters and I love a good story. And this episode of Mushoku Tensei had a lot of that. Uh, Spoiler warning, real quick: if you have not watched episode 16 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, please go watch that, then come back, because this is a review of specific key moments in that episode, and it's gonna be spoilery as hell. I am going to do my absolute best to um, only refer to the events of this episode when I talk about anything regarding the light novel. I do read the light novels over on Twitch. As you can see, they're right there. I read them both I have them both in digital and physical, so I can read them up on there. And if you want to check those out, I read Jobless Reincarnation on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Central Time over on our Twitch channel, link down below. But enough of that. You have been warned. There will be spoilers. I will not be talking about anything that happens past this episode. I will not be spoiling any of that, so you don't have to worry about my knowledge of the light novel stuff. I'm going to do everything I can to not talk about this, and I have an editor that can cut all that stuff out anyway. Uh, but without further ado, let's get into it. Holy shit. Okay, so the big thing is the whole Rudy Paul situation, and how notice that this whole situation between Rudy and Paul, how it's the focal point and how it pulls all these characters. All these other characters are having to react to what's happening. So it is the focal point of how everybody's doing stuff. So okay, so this big thing and how does this affect Eris? How does this affect Regerd? How does this affect Norn? All that stuff, all the other people. By the way, that entire tavern that they were in, everybody in that is part of Paul's group. Anyway, so I don't need to do a big recap of everything, because if you've seen it, you've seen it, and I don't want to waste time pointing out shit that you've already seen or could easily go back to. Also, we have images and clips for that, so yeah. All right, so I did see some people talking about Eris's reaction to when she's supposed to be consoling, as that's the term. I can put it in quotes. Consoling, when Regerd is like, "Hey, no, don't go attacking. You need to console Rudy," and she like kind of looks flustered and everything. And I did see some people reacting and going, "Not like that." And I'm like, no, I don't think her head went to anything sexual. I think it was more, it's because it's not her specialty. Uh, she doesn't know how to console someone. And I typed up like this big thing that I left in a couple of comments. I dropped some paragraphs on people, and I'm sorry. But it is the first time that I have like really gotten into wanting to do that. So I'm going to read some of that and kind of extrapolate upon it. So yeah, I think it was less about her mind being in the gutter and more about her being thrown into a situation she's not really prepared for. She's the fighter. Her thing is she immediately wanted to go after Paul for this emotional damage that he did to someone she really cares about and cares for. And so she's not really someone who can tend to a person's emotional needs. Also, keep in mind that for a year and a half, Rudy has been like her rock, like her solid foundation He's been uh, emotionally solid. No matter what has happened, he has had a plan or been a source of stability for her. And then she sees this man is essentially broken, like just an emotional wreck. And this is a big shock for her. Like when she comes in, she's all happy. She's wanting to share her day with him because he's someone important to her. And she wants to share her day. Here's this cool thing that happened when I was out killing goblins. And then she sees him and it's like, who do I have to kill? It like everything stops. She's like, all right, fuck it. Somebody's got to die. Like that is, and wow, such a reaction. But yeah, she's not really good at that kind of thing. And now she's being asked to step outside of her comfort zone and console Rudy. And that's what I thought was really cute about the scene is like, she's very awkward. She's very timid. She's very shy. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's getting very embarrassed because the more she doesn't know what to do, the more embarrassing it becomes for her and the more awkward she is and the more fidgety she is. And I love that. Like, oh, that's such good character writing right there. And this happened this was very much something that happened both in the anime and the light novel. And I think it was conveyed really well by the anime. And of course, now she's being asked to step in and do something that she's not accustomed to do. Now, as for Rudy's disposition, I think the argument and the fight was really well done. And there are parts of the aftermath of that when he's alone in the inn, in their room in the inn by themselves, that you don't get enough of what's going on internally with him. You don't get how he's processing his thoughts or all of the emotions he's going through. And you get a lot more, you get quite a bit more of that in the light novels. And I think that hurt the scene a little, but not too much, because now instead of getting everything from his mind in that moment, you're left with a more subtle understanding. It's a different way of storytelling. I'm not saying necessarily one is better than the other, but if you want the full context, I would say watch the anime and read the light novel. You get a much more full understanding of what's going on, and I think it will just overall make you appreciate what's happening in each of these scenes a lot more. Like I honestly appreciated this episode of the anime more, I feel like, than I would have if I hadn't read the light novel, because I had a certain level of context about what was happening and why it was happening and where people were mentally during this whole thing that I don't think you necessarily get from just watching the anime. That having been said, I really, really felt what Rudy was going through when he's the moment that really stood out to me was when he's trying to logic his way through it. He's like, okay, I'm gonna cool off. I'm gonna go see my dad. We're gonna talk this out and we're gonna make up and all this stuff. And he's trying to logic his way through emotions. And it definitely feels like over the last year and a half, he's kind of put a lid on that. He's been very logical, and he's kind of pushed his feelings down, his anxieties, his nerves, all that. Some of that's come out. And of course, his perviness is the thing that comes out and disrupts his logic a lot more than I think it should. But he's been very logically minded. And this is a moment where he can't. His head and his heart are very much at conflict. And all this stuff that he has bubbling under the surface, from not just the choices he made in this life, but from his previous life, I feel like a lot of that kind of that self-loathing. And he's like, what kind of person am I because I didn't recognize this? So yeah, it definitely feels like there was a lot more going on internally in that scene. And the revelation of what happened to everyone and how he felt he hadn't really changed from his previous life, like, I feel like that hit him really, really hard. And again, I don't want to go into it too much because it's worth reading the light novels for yourself. But it's like the overwhelming emotions. It was that moment where he was trying to rationalize everything and then he vomits. That's like the emotional overload. That's like he couldn't keep everything below the surface anymore, and it came out, and that's how it came out. Rip to anybody that walked by when he was vomiting out that window, by the by. But a lot of the thought process that he has is, it's he vomits from all the emotions and the thoughts of what he could have done better, and the overwhelming negativity or the overwhelmingly negative self-reflection he's going through. That is what causes him to just go from trying to logic through it to, I can't contain this anymore, and eventually, like, he literally becomes sick of himself. He is so ashamed of himself that he literally vomits because of that. So he becomes sick of himself, essentially. So yeah, it's very much, it's like the act of vomiting caused him to burst, and that was the physical representation of his emotional self, and all this anxiety and negative self-representation he has of himself. Because think about it like this: every time he's gone to see the man god, his mental image of himself is his former incarnation from his previous life. So that's how he views himself. So he definitely has a very negative self-image of himself. These next few episodes are going to be, I definitely feel like these next few episodes, this episode and a couple of that are going to follow, are going to be a very big advertisement for volume 5 of the light novels. And if you're wondering where, if you want to just check out this part, it's volume 5. Go check it out. It's really good. It's the one with Paul and Norn on the cover. You can't miss it. But there's a lot more context I think you can get from the light novels that you would not be able to get from this. Now I don't think the anime will be able to fully represent everything, but I can say that it very much lived up to the image that I had in my head for the whole confrontation between Paul and Rudy. Like, this really lived up to the image that I had in my head. So just really well done on the anime side for just managing to do a really strong part of the light novels as well as they did. And I'm not saying they skipped over a lot and they didn't miss out too much, but there's definitely some more detail that they weren't able to do in the anime, and I understand that. So it's not like I hate the anime for not getting this 100% right, because there was no way they were going to be able to. There's just too much context here that is in the book that you can't fully convey in an anime. And I just have to know and accept that. All right, moving on. The other thing I like about this is that no one is truly a bad guy here. You can sum up, I think, a lot of this episode in just one word, and that's empathy. Even if you don't agree with how Rudy handled the situation or how Paul handled the situation, you can see where they're coming from and kind of understand. And I think the biggest reason why they came to a head like this is because they made a lot of assumptions about each other. Of course, Rudy made the assumption that Paul was sleeping around now that, his mom and his maid weren't around, or I guess you could call her the baby daddy. I have read ahead. I know everybody's proper titles. And if you know, but for right now, I'm calling her baby mama. Baby mama. I'm calling the maid baby mama. But essentially, yeah, Rudy made that assumption, and then Paul made the assumption that Rudy was going to be able to find all this out and was already working on it, and he had this thing built up in his head. I like to say that Paul has 2 ideas that he had built up in his head that did not necessarily meet expectations. He thought that Rudy was going to know and handle the situation in a much better way than he did. And secondly, I think the reunion that Paul had in his head of finally being reunited with his family, even if it's just Rudy. And keep in mind that for a year and a half now, his family has just been Norn and him. It's been him and Norn. He has not seen his wife. He has not seen his baby mama. He has not seen his other daughter, Aisha. He has not seen Rudy. Then finally Rudy shows up, and this is how it happens. Like, yeah, any expectations you had, any dreams that you may have had, those were all shattered. So I feel like that kind of played a part in it. And then, of course, the thing that we didn't get context for that did happen in the light novel was the way that Rudy told the story. He told it in a way, when he was telling Paul the story of what he'd been doing, he specifically told him in a way so as not to make Paul worry. And that was a bit of context that I feel was left out. Maybe they'll cover it later, but that is a bit of context that I didn't feel was properly represented in the anime. But that was a choice that Rudy made when he was telling the story to Paul, and that's a big reason as to why Paul got upset, was because it just sounded like he'd been chilling and relaxing and had an easygoing time and didn't have a care in the world. So it's like these little subtle choices that they made, that each of them made, that kind of boiled over like this, that caused this situation to boil over in a way. But yeah, I love that. That's the other thing I love is, like, in this episode, nobody's right, but nobody's wrong either. There's no bad guy here. There's no villain. They're both wrong and they're both right. So that's what I love. It's like this very real, emotionally raw moment between the two of them. And then, of course, it gets interrupted by little Norn, who comes in and sees, honestly, to her, it's just this random stranger beating the shit out of her father. She doesn't know that's her brother. And man, him just finding out. Of course, that's the other thing that I've seen a lot of people comment on, is how the hell was Rudy supposed to know? He was he was right there at ground zero when it happened. He didn't know how large the blast was, and he didn't hear anything from other people about it. So he had no idea. Now, he could have reached out to try and find out what was going on, but that was another issue here, is that Rudy had assumptions about the event. He assumed it was a localized thing. He didn't realize it was the whole of Fatoa. I could spend freaking hours talking about this and breaking this down, but I'm going to try and rush through it, and I'm sorry, because we're almost at 20 minutes, and I'm trying not to make this an hour-long video. Whew. Even though I very easily could. But yeah, this turned out because they had these built-up preconceived assumptions about the situation, and they both made choices that kind of carried over, and that essentially pushed it to this breaking point. I think that if Rudy had chosen a different way to tell the story, if he'd been a bit more honest about the things instead of lighthearted about the way he told the story, it might have made things a bit easier for Paul to handle. There's also the fact that, if Paul could have tempered his expectations a little bit more, or asked him what happened, if he'd started with, "Oh, you were in the demon continent, what happened when you got to Zantport? Did you not see my letter?" And he's like, "Did you not see my letter at the guild?" And then he could have been like, "I never got to the guild. I went to pick up Regerd, and then we freed a bunch of enslaved members of, like, the Doldia tribe, and then I was falsely accused and imprisoned in the Doldia tribe. I never got to set foot back in Zantport, so I never saw that." And that's the whole thing that could have kind of saved that. So it's on both of them for the way that that they handled the situation. Rudy could have told the story better, and Paul could have actually stopped him to ask specific information instead of getting angry and taking it out on Rudy. They both were dickheads, but they both were also kind of vaguely innocent at the same time. So yeah, essentially just bad family decisions. But yeah, Rudy is the first family member that he's found since he and Norn were just teleported to God knows where. I know where. But you know what? I like this. Since Norn and Paul were teleported to man God knows where. I like that. To man God knows where. All right. And how much of a toll did that take on Paul? For a year and a half, what was that like? What was Paul's life like? And I hope we get that in like the next couple episodes of the anime, because I know we get that in the light novel shortly after this. So I'm hoping we'll see that in the anime. I hope they don't skip it. I really, really do. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to say that it's interesting, and I think it gives more context to Paul and makes him more of a sympathetic character. All right. So, yeah. After you've watched this now and you've had all this time to kind of sit down and kind of compartmentalize and contextualize everything, I think you should go back to, I think it's the last episode of the first core, where Roxy gets to the Fatoa region and she reads the letter from Paul. I think now that you've seen this episode, you go back and you check that out, and there's so much more context behind that. You can definitely see how desperate he is in that letter more, especially now that you've seen Paul in kind of the state that he's in. His eyes are sunken. He's very thin-faced. He's disheveled, and oh man, just I can't go into it too much because I don't want to spoil anything that could potentially be in future episodes, but like I think there's a level of context you get to that scene that you did not have before. I think you'll appreciate that scene a lot more. That having been said, though, guys, thank you so much for sitting here and listening to this, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts and comments are. I'd love to interact with you guys in the comments, because these are just my initial thoughts and opinions on this, going into a deep dive, and this is why I love storytelling, especially character-driven storytelling, so much. This is so rich. This is so rich. Also, guys, in the comments, please don't spoil any light novel stuff for the anime only people there, or give like a giant warning and some space if you're going to spoil some stuff so that people don't just automatically see it. So be courteous. Don't be an ass. That's all I ask. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. If you want to check out any of the stuff that we do, links down in the description. I am Richie Roberts, and I gotta tell you, man, keep watching more anime.